This beauty was the Silicon Graphics 320. Was because the pre-owner yanked out the original equipment and reworked it into a more or less standard PC. I'm a huge fan of Silicon Graphics ever since, and the SGI 320 always had appealed to me. Now, I don't intend to restore this tinkered machine to its former glory. I'd rather look out for a real 320 to still go along with my other SGI machines. But I couldn't just let go this beauty, and I was set on fire by the idea to transform it into a late 90s, early 2000s gaming rig.
Blasphemy! One does not simply
Shh! Just wait and see, will ya? Retrocomputing is the use of older computer hardware and software in modern times. I'm the Vintage Collector, and these are my stories. So you heard right. I'm about to take this thing and rework it into a 2000s gaming rig.
You do know that there is a ton of such retro gaming rig build-up videos out there already.
I know. I'm a cheap copycat. Yes. But I ever since wanted to build a gaming rig of this period myself to complement my modern rig, the C64 and also my 486 machine, even the arcade table. Though I never began the project since I couldn't convince myself to go with the ugly and boring case designs of that era. The late 90s and early 2000s were not exactly the period of shiny and stylish gaming rigs unless you modded everything yourself. And with that former SGI 320, what would I have to lose? This machine was originally released in fall 1999, so totally period correct. So I went with a period correct mainboard, the Asus P3BF, which debuted in July 1999, featuring the famous Intel 440BX chipset. To go along with it, I took an Intel Pentium 3 550MHz with a 100MHz front-side bus. For those still remembering, this is the Klamath series. Then I went with an Asus V7700 graphics card, which sports the Nvidia GeForce 2 Ti with 64MB of RAM. This card is from fall 2001 and was considered a high-end graphics card at the time. Most mainstream desktop mainboards didn't feature yet onboard Ethernet at the time, so you had to plug in an add-on card for joining a network. The 3Com 3C905 was released in 1994 first time and saw many iterations over the years. I'm sporting the 3C905-TX PCI card, which provides access to both 10 and 100 megabits Ethernet networks. For the audio cards it was the same thing, for the most you had to go with an add-on card. I deliberately chose the Creative Labs ES1371 audio PCI card rather than a Sound Blaster, though I'm gonna explain this later on. Then I have this ID to CF adapter that I intend to use as the boot drive, and a stack of various ID hard drives, of which I'm gonna pull one as the data drive. And I'm sure that I'll pull out some matching RAM modules as well. Then I'm about to pull out the old stuff, just to put in yet some older stuff again. This rig is also not state of the art anymore, and probably would qualify as a retro machine by itself, considering the GeForce GTX 660 Ti, which is from around 2012. But anyway, everything must go. Here we get to see how heavily this machine was reworked. The original backplate was cut out and replaced by a standard backplate from an ATX case, which was then secured to the original structure using rivets. Also, a mainboard carrier plate was transplanted into this case. The backside trim panel was also reworked to match the power supply and the backside panel. This yellowish goo is construction foam. So obviously some part of the case was filled with foam for whatever reason. I'm about to clean it a bit. Also, there's a sticker of whom I believe to be the original owner of this machine. The front-facing trim panel is easy to remove. There's a hidden lever at the top of the panel which can be pushed up to slide the panel to the front. I'll then remove this combo adapter for audio, USB and FireWire, as it too belongs to the mainboard I just removed, and I have no way to connect it to the even more ancient P3BF mainboard. I also removed the two retainer rails, as I'll be needing them to install the 3.5-inch floppy drive.
You will be installing a 3.5-inch floppy drive? Really?
Yes, as that's still period correct. Inspecting the CD-DVD combo drive, I realize these scars and markings on the trim. It almost feels like somebody tried pulling it out using a screwdriver, not knowing how easy it was to remove the front panel in order to access and unlock the drive retainer rails. Also check out the front face of the case. There's a huge fan installed, with even a second big opening made for yet another fan. And see the construction foam on the side trim panel? And even here, on the top. I'm not sure why this was done. Maybe as an attempt to provide for some noise dampening, but I will not remove it because it's sticky and distributed everywhere. Chances big I would destroy the trim panel when trying to remove it, and it's gonna be a big mess. I'm okay with leaving it just as is. Then I'll be installing the P3BF mainboard. There's not much magic about it, except that I'm missing the backside I/O bezel. I have to search again because it must be somewhere around. Cabling, oh well. I always hated to do it, and we'll see soon why. But even more I hated it if there was free-floating cables. Call it a personal quirk, but I have to stow away these cables and make them tidied and secured using zip ties. I hate loose cables. Then I'll hook up the flat band ribbon cables. Oh my, I'm grateful about the invention of SATA and SATA cables, as dealing with those ribbon cables is just a pain. But I'll go along with installing the other components. Here comes the graphics card, which does not yet require an additional power plug. You see, back in the days, you could still deliver enough power to drive the graphics card via the ISA, PCI or AGP bus. Then I'm gazing through my endless armada of RAM modules. I eventually found a 133 MHz SDRAM module with 256 MB capacity. I won't be installing more RAM, and technically speaking a PC133 module is not required, as I will run the mainboard with the default 100 MHz clock. But it's good to know that I could overclock the bus if I really wanted to. And here comes the 3COM network card and also the audio PCI controller, to which I'm hooking up the CD-ROM audio cable already. I'll also be temporarily installing the floppy drive. It's not the correct one, as it sports a wide trim panel. And I'm applying zip ties again for stowing the flat band cable. The hard drive cage still contains the SATA drives, which I'm about to remove and replace by an ID drive.
You are aware that you're always calling these ID, when in fact this is parallel ATA or PATA.
Oh my, seriously? It is totally correct to call it ID, which was widely used as a synonym for many years for the ATA and ATA-PI standard, which simply comes from the term AT attachment and goes back to the IBM PC AT. The name PATA is a retronym, which came up only after the introduction of the serial ATA or SATA standard after the year 2000. Meanwhile, I'm ready to connect the peripherals and power up the machine, as this is the first time powering up with a previously removed CMOS battery. I have to reconfigure everything in the BIOS. Back in the days, I originally had the P2BF mainboard, which still had to be configured using jumpers for the CPU settings. I chose the P3BF because it still has the 440BX chipset, but allows for soft configuration and even overclocking via the BIOS. But what is that? It seems the system is not detecting any of my drives, is it? Plus it shows an issue with the hardware monitor. What's up? I think I have a fault in the power supply, as the -5 volts rail is actually reported with a -6 volts reading. I will be swapping out the PSU eventually. Then I'm looking furtherly at the hard drive's issue, and then I realized that I had accidentally swapped the primary and secondary IDE channels. And see yourself how it's even called IDE on the silk screen markings of the mainboard. So much so about PATA. Anyways, even after moving the CF to ID adapter to the primary channel and double checking for the jumpers and doing some forth and back, I came to the conclusion that this adapter wouldn't want to play nice. So no speedy SSD-like disk performance. Sorry, I just replaced the boot drive with a standard ID drive for that matter. And after having updated my hardware setup accordingly, the drive detection would finally work out. So it's time to think about the OS installation. I'm pulling off a CD to install Windows 98 2nd edition, but beforehand I had to prepare the hard drive using FDisk. I created a 6GB primary DOS partition and formatted it using FAT32. Then eventually I kicked off the setup.exe. I supplied it with the -IS parameters to skip the text mode scan disk. Installing Windows 98 is straightforward, some questions asked, and then it's basically waiting for the process to complete. It's a lengthy process, and it gave me time to notice and fear about the screen flickering. It's somewhat visible in this still frame, being this horizontal garbling especially visible in the blue background. I did hope that it was just an issue with the screen refresh and sync rates of the TFT display and not an actually broken graphics card. Though I can only finally verify this once the installation completes and I can install the correct graphics driver. Once Windows was up and running, I first copied the setup files to the /Windows/Options/Cabs directory. It's always handy to have them on disk if you're changing some of the Windows component options. I'll then also install a period correct version of the Norton utilities, one of which was not yet the bloatware it eventually became. One important thing to check on every Windows 9X setup is if all drives use DMA, Direct Memory Access. This speeds up disk access big time while reducing CPU load. I'm also configuring the CD-ROM drive to be on the Z drive letter. Yet another personal quirk, I just like the CD-ROM being the last drive letter in the system. Looking at Device Manager, I still have to deal with this unknown audio device, so let's install the correct driver for it to work. And finally, I'd install the NVIDIA graphics driver. One reboot later, I'll find the system in 256 colors mode. Now I can apply wallpaper, the cloud's image from Windows 95 it still is, and pulling the display settings to 1024 by 768 and 30 bits true color. And remember about the flickering I mentioned before? It's gone, so it was just the driver and the screen resolution settings. And now to run Norton SpeedDisk to defragment the drive. But what's that? It feels so slow and sluggish. I was telling you about enabling DMA mode before, right? Turns out I forgot to do it for the main hard drive, and after changing this and rebooting again, SpeedDisk feels way more snappy than before. I haven't said it yet, but this system is going to be a multi-boot system. So besides Windows 98 2nd edition, I'll be installing Windows 2000 Professional as well. So let's head out for yet another lengthy text mode experience. Windows 2000 takes considerably longer for the installation than Windows 98. And eventually I'd end up with a vanilla Windows 2000 installation. This version is an original RTM version from February 2000 with no service packs applied at all. Now I'm about to install Service Pack 4 and also the post Service Pack 4 update rollup package. There's even an unofficial update package that was assembled many years ago by the community of winboard.org, facilitating the installation of patches that came after the update rollup. Unfortunately, this only applies to the German version of Windows 2000. I don't know if a similar thing exists for other language versions of Windows 2000 as well. Meanwhile, I'd also install Internet Explorer 6 and eventually the NVIDIA graphics drivers. And finally, the desktop shines in 1024 by 768 and 30-bit true colors as well. No more screen flickering. On Windows 2000, I never used the Norton utilities, but actually I just had the commercial version of Diskkeeper for defragmenting the hard drives. And even though it was always claimed that it was not necessary to defragment NTFS formatted hard drives, reality has proven different, and even Microsoft included a defragging utility since Windows XP. Now, after all this software mumble, how about some hardware trickery again? Maybe you had noticed that the system didn't emit the typical startup beeps. That's simply because there's no speaker installed in this system. The original SGI 320 didn't need one, and the PC can work just fine even without a speaker. But I'm about to add one. So here I'm soldering up some wires to both the speaker and the 2-pins connector. Also, the system is currently lacking status LEDs for both the system's power on status and the hard drive activity. That's weird, because the front-facing panel actually has an acrylic insert which was meant to reflect the LED to the outside view. I'm making up some wiring from breadboard patch cables, connecting them to a cyan-colored LED for the system power on status and a red LED for the hard drive activity. I'll then pull the wires in through this hole there. This is also where the original LED wiring setup went through. I've no idea why this was removed. And here again, I'm doing some cable management on the inside. Now, let's do a quick power on test to see if the LED works. Yes, that looks good already. And here's the backside of the trim panel with that acrylic insert I just mentioned. I'll be destroying it with the best intentions, necessarily drilling in some holes. I'll first do the drilling using a 2mm drill before I'll be using the 5mm drill. The 5mm diameter is just the right size so I can stick the two LEDs into the acrylic reflector and it'll just hold in position. And with this mod now in place, you'll see the red LED whenever there's disk activity and the cyan LED providing for the power on status. And did you notice the startup beep now? So it's finally all coming together. But wait, there's still more to come. So I went through everything and found a floppy with a black front bezel. As the machine was also missing some slot bezels, I'm happy to report that I actually found 2 black bezels in my fund as well. Also, a matching IO bezel finally turned up. So I'd start by again removing all add-in cards and unfastening the mainboard in order to install the IO bezel. From there, I reassembled everything, beginning with some more cable management. Did I mention I totally like later years SATA cables for being way easier to deal with as when compared to those clumsy ribbon cables? Then I'm reinstalling all add-in cards again. Eventually, the front side panel is laying in front of me. It's quite late at night, but I had this weird idea to do a little mod anyway. So I'm preparing to slice some mounting brackets into shape. I will match them to fit behind those cutout holes of the front bezel. But what for?
Yeah, this is also what I wonder about.
I'd then be drilling in some holes.
Still doesn't make any sense to me.
And preparing some LEDs, adding some heat shrink to the leads, bending them into position and inserting them onto the mounting brackets.
Ah, now I see where this is going.
Yeah, you got it. I'm about to do something with LEDs. Who could have imagined? So here I am soldering up all the wiring for the LEDs, putting them into a serial chain. These are cyan-colored LEDs with a forward voltage of about 2.9 volts each. As I'm wiring 3 in a row, this means I need to dissipate about 3 to 4 volts when connecting it to the 12 volts rail. Consequentially, I have to also include a 300 ohms resistor to protect against overcurrent. A functional test lights it all up, so I'll then continue to affixate these improvised mounting brackets to the trim panel. I won't be doing this as a permanent installation, but I'm rather using double-sided duct tape. Even though the machine was so heavily tinkered with, beyond any reasonable restorability, I don't want to make things worse. So by using duct tape, I could always remove it again if needed to. And here you see again how I fit in the topside status LEDs into those holes that I drilled into the acrylic reflector earlier on. And this is what it looks like once finally installed. And remember that I had installed a dedicated data drive with 20 GB of capacity, which should be about right to hold enough games to run from either Windows 98 or Windows 2000. I haven't been playing Quake 3 Arena since a long time. Let's see if I can still at least survive against a bot.
3 frags left.
Back on Windows 98, I had created a directory at c:/utils, into which I'm copying the plain DOS mouse driver CT mouse and a bunch of IDE CD-ROM device drivers. As I have an LG drive, the lg.sys it will be, so I'm firing up edit to change config.sys accordingly. You see that I also had added hymem.sys and emm386.exe manually in there. Windows 9X loads them automatically by default, but I want to do some memory optimization, so I'd rather take control myself. I added the noEMS parameter to the emm386 as I need just the extended memory, but not the expanded memory. This will free up some 64 kilobytes of RAM and make it available to DOS. Then I'm adding the LG.sys CD-ROM driver. I have to care for the DOS mode specific startup file as well, which is not the default autoexec.bat, but the DOSstart.bat, which you'll find in your c:/Windows directory. Obviously, the apinit.exe is already in there, which is needed to initialize the Audio PCI sound card. But more on that in an instant. First, I'll add the echo off command, as I don't like it when everything is echoed on screen twice. Then I'll first add the MSCDX driver, which, in combination with the aforementioned LG.sys driver, provides me access to the DVD drive in DOS mode. Again, I'll configure it to be bound to drive Z. I'll also add CT mouse, so I can use the mouse in DOS mode as well. At the very last, I'll add apload to load the Audio PCI's wavetable file. And after a reboot to make my changes in config.sys take effect, I'll check the DOS memory outline. But what's that? Although the drivers were loaded, I realize everything is still stuffed into conventional memory instead of the upper memory. Let's check out config.sys again. Well, oh well, let's tell DOS to load high and into the UMBs. I forgot that one. Let's check out quickly how it looks like in DOS mode. I see CT mouse loads just fine, also apinit is called, although it reports weird errors, and I also see a notion about an unfound command. And what about the DVD drive? It's complaining about no disk being inserted, but then happily reads from it once I inserted a CD-ROM. So I check back at DOSstart.bat and change the apload.com to apload.exe. That should do it. And after this iteration and yet another reboot, DOS memory usage reports me that most stuff is now loaded into the upper memory blocks, leaving me more conventional memory available. 601 kilobytes as opposed to the 513 we saw before. And in plain DOS mode, it's actually even 618 kilobytes available below the 640 kilobytes barrier, which is quite okay already. While it's not as powerful as Bash's built-in history, DOSKey provides a similar history function to DOS. I include it into autoexec.bat as well, as it won't steal too much memory and there's still enough UMBs available. Even then, in a Windows DOS box, I now have 606 kilobytes of free conventional memory, but I still have issues with the Audio PCI's AP init, which won't initialize. I start by investigating into the soundscape.ini in the Windows directory, which reveals these weird control characters. It's probably because of these, as the file might not be fully readable. I'm gonna correct this. Okay, that didn't help. It still complains about missing things in the configuration file. I have another config file as a reference, so I'll be adding statements until it stops complaining. Okay, that was it. It's quite weird, as I didn't create the Soundscape ini file in the first place. It is directly maintained by the driver setup utility in Windows. But obviously, some stuff was missing, which would lead to the Audio PCI sound card being unusable in DOS mode. Though now that it initializes, I should install some DOS games and see if it all works as expected. So I'm installing the usual FPS suspects like Doom, Heretic, Hexen, Duke Nukem 3D and Quake. And during my test with Duke Nukem 3D, I can confirm that also the audio works now fine in DOS mode. Now, this was just exactly the reason why I chose the ES1371 in favor to installing both a PCI and an ISA audio card. The ES1371 provides close to 100% DOS sound compatibility if everything is set up correctly. This was one of the main painstakes back then when the first PCI audio cards were made, that they simply didn't work right on DOS and with legacy games. Admittedly, the ES3071 won't work with everything. The older the game, the more likely it is to fail as well. But for that, I then have my 486 machine. Now let's have a brief look at a bleeding edge topic that I just learned the other day on Twitter. You may know that Microsoft pulled the plug on Windows Update for many old operating systems 2 years ago. So except for using old downloads and unofficial update packages like the one from winboard.org I mentioned before, there's not much luck in updating these historic operating systems. But now there is LegacyUpdate.net, which replicates the functionality of the old Windows Update and maintains compatibility back to Windows 2000. Windows 9X is currently out of luck here. But on my Windows 2000 install, I simply ran the Legacy Updates installer, which would reconfigure everything. I even get a new menu item in the Windows Start menu, pointing me at the update website, which looks almost exactly as the Microsoft original. And say what, it actually installs many updates that I have missed before, even though I applied Service Pack 4, the update rollup and even the unofficial update package. Oh hey, look at this, isn't that just absolutely awesome? I mean, it's updating an operating system for which Microsoft ceased support over 10 years ago. It must be said though, you will of course not get any newly released updates from there. All it does is providing the updates that Microsoft had ever officially released. So it is by no means to be understood to create a secure and safe system. But it's just a way for enthusiasts to patch up their vintage systems to at least the last known good state.
But how do you know this is safe and the downloaded updates are not going to be infesting your system with malicious code?
This is a very good question. Maybe we should look into a network security topic in an upcoming video then. And this concludes my look into transforming this former SGI graphics workstation into a contemporary 2000s gaming rig. And while my Windows 2000 here is still installing updates from legacyupdate.net, I achieved many goals here. I transplanted a historic Asus P3BF mainboard alongside with other contemporary components into this machine. I installed both Windows 98 SE and Windows 2000 and a gazillion of games. This is probably not the best possible system in terms of specs, but capability-wise is a very powerful hybrid system offering best of all worlds for this transitional period. I would of course never have tinkered with this machine if I had received it in original condition. As an SGI lover, I would definitely have preserved it. And this was my initial motivation when I saw this machine, until I realized how much was, so to say, destroyed by the ATX conversion. But it still makes a good addition to my collection the way it is now, and is definitely one of a kind gaming rig. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you had enjoyed it as much as I had enjoyed working on this machine. I'm the Vintage Collector, and this was my story. See you next time. You're about to see some potential upcoming topics for future videos right now. Please let me know in the comments which topics you are particularly interested in. Of course, you can also drop me in some other topics you'd like me to chase down. Oh my, this really works, and it's still finding new updates.